Welcome to Modern Anarchy, the podcast exploring sex, relationships, and liberation. I'm your host, Nicole.
I tried to keep her quiet, but she's screaming inside of me. I tried to keep her hiding, oh, shut up. I tried to keep her quiet, but she's a wild, wild woman.
On today's episode, we have Silver. Join us for another relationship anarchy research conversation. Together we talk about the infinite gray space of connection, getting curious about jealousy, and expanding our circles of care. Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to Modern Anarchy. I am so delighted to have all of you pleasure activists from around the world tuning in for another episode each Wednesday. My name is Nicole. I am a sex and relationship psychotherapist with training in psychedelic integration therapy, and I am also the founder of the Pleasure Practice, supporting individuals in crafting expansive sex lives and intimate relationships. Dear listener, you guys know that I love every single relationship anarchy conversation. It is such a joy to continue my dissertation research and to be able to hold this space where we really unpack how to better love one another. How do we build stronger communities? How do we dismantle the intimacy escalator we talked about last time, right? All these internalized systems that are so deep and present within our collective unconscious, truly. And so together, these conversations are really shaping the movement, right? We are creating new language. We are creating new conversations around what it means to be a relationship anarchist. And I'm just so delighted every time that a listener like you trusts me to come on to the show and to answer the questions in the link below, because relationship anarchy is certainly not defined by the experts, right? It is defined by community, and all of us have an important insight and perspective on the practice. And so it's such an honor to be able to create these resources and these conversations with you, dear listener. So if you're looking to join the conversation, the link is below. I would love to hear your insights on the practice. And also, I had a handful of people reach out asking for my book, The Psychedelic Jealousy Guide, to be turned into a PDF and a free downloadable book. And so I finally got around to making that happen. So also that is now available on the website as well for all of you who prefer to read my book rather than on the website in a PDF version. So I wanted to let you know since I had a handful of folks reach out. All right. Dear listener, if you are ready to liberate your pleasure, you can explore my offerings and resources at modernanarchypodcast.com, linked in the show notes below. And I want to say a big thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. You are supporting the long-term sustainability of the podcast, keeping this content free and accessible to all people, so thank you. If you want to join the Patreon community, get exclusive access into my research and personal exploration, then you can head on over to patreon.com/modernanarchypodcast, also linked in the show notes below. And with that, dear listener, please know that I am sending you all my love, and let's tune in to today's episode. So the first question I like to ask each guest is, how would you introduce yourself to the listeners?
I'm a human trying to be loving and caring in this world, trying to navigate being true to myself, taking care of myself, and showing up for those around me.
Beautiful. Well, it's a joy to have you here, and I'm really excited to talk about relationship anarchy.
Too.
Yeah. So the first big question, what is relationship anarchy?
Yeah, so relationship anarchy to me, it's really the freedom and the power to custom build your own relationships and think about what you want your relationships to be. So as I mentioned, it requires a lot of freedom, but also that can mean a lot of honesty with yourself, with the people around you, a lot of communication about actually getting in touch with what you really want, and then
Mm-hmm.
being able to ask that of the people around you, and really letting go of expectations instead of looking for here's the models of what relationships should be, trying to figure out like here's what is and what works with people in your life.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, I hear this very dynamic quality to it, right? Is what's working for us now, not what worked in the past, not some sort of escalator that we're trying to walk, but what is working for us right now and how can we communicate that? And I am deeply humbled from my personal journey of navigating that. Of like, what is it that I want in this connection? When you take off all the scripts, when you take off all of that, and there's just infinite possibility, it is humbling to try and find the language to describe how you want to connect.
Oh, extremely. It's both really terrifying and
Yeah.
exhilarating. It's so exciting of getting that honesty. Okay, what do I really want? But like even just asking yourself that question, getting in touch with that takes time, and also
Mhm.
knowing that that can change over time. That the way your relationships look today might be completely different in a year, even less time than that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. And so I find myself trying to ride that nuance between knowing everything can move and feeling security in that at the same time, right? Because there is that fear when I'm attaching to someone of, well, at any point this could absolutely change, which is possible in all relationship structures, right? We know the
Mhm.
divorce rates of monogamy. We know the complexities of relationships just generally, and that things can inevitably change. But there's something very inherent to relationship anarchy because I think that it's kind of built on this concept of fluidity and making sure that the relationships are mutually bringing joy and pleasure and not just out of a sense of obligation. And so that means dynamic change. And so finding security in dynamic change, oof, wow.
Yeah, I think that people often view like commitments, or they think that commitments to certain structures will create the security. And yeah, there's no like things can always change. God has changed.
hmm Yeah, yeah. Yeah, when I think about past relationships, it felt like before I even had this awareness, like it's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna do the relationship escalator. I wouldn't have said that word, but right, I would have been like, okay, we're gonna get married and then we're gonna have kids and we're gonna live together and we're gonna do this, right, right, right. And so as I make new attachments, it's interesting to watch if the mind goes to that space and to really get critical on like, is this something I actually want? Is this socially conditioned? And to kind of take off those expectations and just be curious about where they're coming from.
Oh, it can be really complicated and confusing. Like it's hard to not have as much language around what your commitments or connections can look like. So there's sometimes
hmm
more figuring it out or even realizing like, oh, I do need to or want to have a conversation with a certain person about how are we feeling about this connection? Like, are there certain commitments or expectations that we want to discuss at least for now? But it can also be really freeing. So I moved, I was in Chicago for about a decade, and I moved 2 years ago. And just through this, like obviously all of my relationships changed when I
Right.
physically switched locations. And I don't think it was only relationship anarchy, but I think it enabled me to really get to honor and have a lot of gratitude for the connections that did stay in my life. And just they felt that much more special, like seeing how that love can really withstand the test of time and like
Mm-hmm.
withstand such drastic transformation too.
Yeah, yeah. How do you see that connected to relationship anarchy? I'm already starting to think of things,
Yeah,
but could you flesh that out more for me and the listeners?
it's a great like I think relationship anarchy, it just gives me a framework to really be intentional about connections and be open to love. I love the relationship anarchy manifesto. It's
Mm,
very simple. But really the first line in it is love is abundant and every relationship is unique and just reminding myself of all the love from all the various connections that I'm surrounded by. Like when I moved, something I really struggled with is not having as many in-person connections like where
sure.
I am and feeling lonely about that. And just reminding me of the deep love that I had from other friends. And really, also, I think a part of, I both love and hate the word friend. Like, friend
Mm,
can mean so many different things. And there's
right.
not, yeah, like language is something that I wish we had more nuance around. But I think a part of relationship anarchy for me is really elevating that role of friends. Like I want all kinds of like I don't want just a romantic partner or partners to be the center of my life. Like I want lifelong friends that I make lifelong commitments around or really make life decisions for. And
Mhm.
I think getting to really elevate that helped me feel more connected and grounded through such a big transition.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you see the love that's all around you instead of looking for this one person to fulfill everything, which is not possible for any dynamic that anyone ever does. But we grow up in that paradigm, right? There's gonna be the one that's gonna unlock everything for your spiritual and emotional development needs. Um, rather to seeing, wow, I am surrounded by so many different beautiful relationships that all have different levels of connection and intimacy and things that we do together to feel that full presence. I find that to be one of the biggest paradigm shifts of relationship anarchy. Instead of one, or even in polyamory, two, three, four, wherever you draw your line on your capacity limits, to see
Mhm.
all of your relationships as a part of your web, your connection that are important and should be looked at with intentionality.
Totally. Yeah, and I kind of came into this through the polyamory line, like read up
Sure, same.
like the ethical slut was a great, that's not polyamorous necessarily, but like multi-amory. I love that podcast. That really
Right.
helped me think about relationships. Then the longer I was in it, I realized I wasn't necessarily just looking for more types of romantic connections, although it's lovely when that happens, but really just getting to be as open to the love that exists in any form in my life and getting to celebrate that to its full extent. Instead of, I
Hmm.
think some people try to say, like, yeah, they put the romantic relationship on a pedestal and then friends go here. Like friends are more like when I have time or this casual thing. And I don't know, you can have really deep, beautiful commitments with friends.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the world will be a better space when we share that focus,
Mhm.
right? Instead of just one person that we show up for intentionally, to share that focus of intentionality with your whole community. Oof, different paradigm.
Totally. And something else that we haven't touched on yet that I think is a really important like tenet of relationship anarchy, like it has the word anarchy, it is an inherently a political practice.
Yes.
And I really view it as a way to expand your circles of care. I mean, the couple in itself is not innately coercive, but the idea that the couple has to be your end all be all or like the most important relationship and is the way that you pass down resources. It's the one person that you're going to rely on, and whatever happens to them, it's your sole responsibility to care for it. All of that can be extremely coercive. And yeah, just reminding ourselves that we have more support, that we can be accountable to more people and should really be a force to try to support
Hmm.
at a larger scale.
Yeah.
It's a tool to really expand your circle of care and to give yourself both the support, because it's a lot of work to try to hold yourself accountable to show up and care for a larger community, but that can also be really beautiful. And especially during times like this, it's so important to really think about how we can support one another and all the power that we do have as individuals and as these small scale communities or larger scale communities too.
Yeah, absolutely. You cannot, it takes a village, right? That's the saying, it takes a village.
Mhm.
And so many people are so dependent on the couple form, to such a degree that it produces intense stress and pain on that relationship. And that's something, again, that can happen in polyamory. That can happen in monogamy. It's not, one or the other there, because you can have two partners and put everything into that and neglect the rest. And right. So that's where I think the ideas of relationship anarchy, whether you're practicing polyamory or monogamy or any other form, this concept of community, that we all need community and we all thrive in community, and taking intentionality to that. That's also where a lot of like church played a long role for long in our human existence, because it brought people together in that sort of collective way to see that, hey, it's not just me. I am actually part of a collective. That's a little bit of the we have like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, in our Western thinking, which says that at
Mhm.
the top of this triangle means the highest point of your development is that you have reached peak individualization. Like, look at you all by yourself. Like, that's the fully actualized human. And I was going through my like decolonizing psychedelic assisted psychotherapy training, and they had this, I believe it's a First Nations sort of pyramid, and at the top of that pyramid is community, not self-actualization, right? And so I'm really curious about relationship anarchy and reworking these Western concepts of hyper individualization and even the couple form as like the top of that pyramid compared to wow, we're in a collective. What does it mean to be a part of a collective and see the community as actually the highest form of self-actualization?
So much of it. I mean, especially since the election, I've seen so many, like a lot of people are thinking about, oh, how can I take care of myself? Like I need more therapy
Mm,
or like what are the ways that I can really create that self-care for myself? And it can be really powerful to then get with other people and realize here are ways that we can show up and care for ourselves, that we can remind ourselves or build our collective power. And yes, that takes a lot of energy. I'm not saying like there is a privilege to like have the time or the space for that. And we definitely like need rest as well. And solely going the individualistic route
mhm.
doesn't fulfill you in the same way. It doesn't build the same kind of power, it doesn't build the same kind of support structures. And there's only so many things we can do alone.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
beauty too, when you have more people, is it lets you be more honest with yourself of like what you actually like, what your capacity is, or like the best ways that you can show up. And like it brings out the best parts of yourself too, instead of you trying to do everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it can be so helpful to go out and see yourself as a part of something bigger than you, right?
Mhm.
And I think about the ways that our concept of self is formed by our relationships just flat out, right? Our concept of self, that's why, I always talk to my clients when they go home for different holidays or different events, and they say, like, wow, like I felt like these parts of myself that I haven't felt since childhood just completely came up, and I was enraged and I was doing this. And it's like, yeah, like your concept of self is created by your ecosystem of who you're in relationship with. And so when you start to have more deep, intimate, intentional connections, you as a human being will also change if you've been in this hyper individualistic, very couple structured sense of life. That as you start to come into relationship anarchy, your concept of self is also going to change as you invest. I need words that are not capitalism. As you spend time,
Other
there's
than
another.
war, there's a ton of war
Yeah,
metaphors out there. Fewer war metaphors.
no, I don't do that. I don't do that. I saw a tantra retreat that titled like one of the events. It was like warrior wifey, and I was like, oof, that is not the space for me. Um, woo. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So as you spend more time with other people, your concept of self is also going to change, which I think is really beautiful.
Yeah, like one of the joys of it is the like amount of self-discovery you get and just the energy.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm someone who thrives off of new experiences and I love
Mm-hmm.
getting to see how I show up differently when I meet new people or get to form new connections, like getting to be really in touch with different parts of myself.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a perfect segue into our next question, which is how do you practice relationship anarchy? What does this look like for you?
And I love the word practice. Like I
Yeah, let's talk
used
about
to
that.
It is very much a practice. Like I used to call myself an aspiring relationship anarchist because it felt like I had to be this like perfect, like didn't use labels for any of my relationships or anything like that. And honestly, right now, from the outside, I look like my life is very like heteronormative monogamous passing.
Mm,
I have a male nesting partner right now, and it's very easy for people to make certain assumptions, like particularly at work or with my family. But that doesn't mean like as we've already talked about, like I really focus on elevating all kinds of connections, being intentional, and really like focusing like my first and foremost commitment I view is to myself,
mm,
which is a weird that almost feels juxtaposed to what we were just talking about with community care,
mm,
but really the best ways that I can show up in community or find ways to like hold myself accountable to see what I can give to other people is to first be honest with myself about what I want, what I have capacity for, like yeah, and what I really need.
right.
Yeah, so the way that that relationship anarchy shows up, it's that intentionality, like with myself, that openness to new connections. I am really open to whatever connection, like seeing what space that looks like. I have a lot of, this is for like the friend word, like I've had a lot of beautiful connections where friend doesn't quite cut it, and we might not look like quote unquote romantic partners to the outside, but there's definitely a lot of that energy in the relationship. But also boundary setting, like it can be opening up and inviting people in. And then I think boundary setting and saying no to certain expectations that people might have is just as much a part of that. Like I grew up in a religious community, and there's
Yeah.
definitely a lot of expectations and norms there. But even like with my partner, like I live with someone who's extremely introverted, and
Mm,
there are certain times where it's great to have him like come to other large events, but there's plenty where I don't want to be babysitting him. He's not going to have a good time.
mm,
And I think some people really have an expectation of doing everything or most things with a certain partner, and I love the freedom of not doing that. Like I have other people that I kind of view as my plus one to other kinds of events, or just being able to go solo to a lot of things in my life and getting to show up and have just being free and experiencing new things or new connections there too.
Yeah, absolutely. Hence why it's a beautiful practice, right? There is a
Mhm.
never-ending well of expectations and internalization of the systems of how we're supposed to show up for love and connection. Wow, it is deep. Anyone who says that they have completely eradicated themselves from the systems, I think is a scary. It's like you can't. That's not how this works, you know?
No, and there's no perfect, and
Yeah.
what this actually looks like day to day varies just in terms of like checking in with yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it's a humbling journey to be able to name that. And you're talking about your nesting partner and to even go through the complexities of, you know, I guess this is just what I'm feeling in my heart of being able to name to that nesting partner or any other partner that you're connecting with or a lover or friend or human that I'm feeling
Any other
drawn.
words? They're just like a overarching word for all of that
Yeah, 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 yeah,
that
yeah.
you were
The
saying.
the web, I guess maybe the web.
Yeah.
I like lover. That's been a great one for me because it feels so expansive. I have lovers I have sex with, I have lovers I don't have sex with, and I use that word often. I'm like, "Hey lover," like, "Hello lover." Like I use that. Anyone who's reached like a certain level of what's that level? I don't know, but a closeness and intimacy that I feel of you're seeing me, I'm seeing you. I'm like, "Hi beautiful human. Hey lover." Um Beyond that, if people want to use labels like partner, I usually just have a co-created conversation on like what does that mean for you? What does that mean for me? What does that mean for us as a third separate thing that we do? Which has been a really fun space to like get creative with the words.
Yeah. I might, yeah, my love of loves. I like that.
Yeah,
Start
my
using
love.
that more.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But just the complexities, and this is something in all relationships that we navigate when whew, yeah, when you've been relating with someone in a certain capacity for a certain amount of time and your desires with that shift and you want to move and say you don't want to invite that nesting partner as your plus one anymore and the pain that that can create and the ways that you stay in connection with that person through that pain as you navigate your shifting energies out of expectations of the relationship escalator. Oof. Wow.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
so we made the move together, which
Okay.
that is a whole level of interdependency and
Yes.
transition. Like it was really difficult for me after the move of, luckily I already knew a few people in this area, but even then they were like 30 minutes away, and I was moving from Chicago where it's very walkable, it's really easy to get to. And I'd been there for so long that I just had a really large like love of loves that were very easily accessible.
Yeah.
And going from that to feeling much more isolated, even though I got to move with someone that I love deeply, was still difficult. It was a level of dependence that I'm not super comfortable with. And just in terms of energy, like I thrive with more social connections or getting to explore different facets of myself. So yeah, it was a powerful transition to go through, and I'm like glad that I'm now building community here.
Mm-hmm.
He and I were talking about really, even after that transition, like really clearly being able to live together well, to be able to make it through hard times, and at the same time, and like really enjoying living together, but knowing that we both really prioritize community. And knowing that in a few years, like we'd like to live closer to other community and maybe that'll happen together and maybe it won't. And being able to have that conversation where we care first and foremost about creating that space to be open about where we both want to end up.
Mhm.
Just getting emotional, like it made me feel so loved.
Mm,
And it's something
yeah.
that not everyone understands that like that in itself is a commitment to me and it's a commitment for the two of us to show up for each other in a really honest way instead of necessarily a way like in a way that feels right for us.
Yeah. Yeah. What is the emotionality tapping into there for you?
It's a kind of euphoria and joy from feeling really loved, feeling really supported, and getting to do that for another person in a way that we aren't necessarily taught or we aren't given the script to initially.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Because, yeah, like the script of our typical American consciousness would be, so you're breaking up with your partner? So you're breaking up? You're moving out? You're breaking up? Well, of course, like right? Like and it's like, oh my God. No, like we are staying in connection. We are finding ways to continue to write our love story that are not the typical script. And this is what's working for the two of us, right? It's like a whole different paradigm of thinking where I think a traditional framework would see that as a breakup, as a even people use this word de-escalation as if you're going back down the escal. Hey everyone, why we're reorienting, if we're taking it off the escalator, that means we also don't say de-escalating either, right? Like we're reorienting.
Exactly. And I think sometimes like those structures and the like relationship escalator, it's so prevalent that it can be that much harder to understand when you want something that is opposed to that kind of model and that much more confusing for the people around you if it's not something that they're thinking about. And so it was that much more freeing and realizing, oh, this is a way that I feel really loved, but I didn't even know beforehand. And there's such a joy in getting to discover that.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's like tapping into more language, tapping into more authenticity and more communication skills, I imagine, all at the same time.
Mhm. And that's like another, like the whole de-escalation, like it's relationship anarchy, but it could also be so many things. I find this a lot in queer communities. Like there's just an openness to this kind of connection, but de-escalation, like yes, certain times you are spending less time or
Sure.
like you're connecting in different ways, but it almost has a sort of lesser in it. And
Right?
I don't know, some of my favorite connections are people that I used to spend a lot more time with, but we've stayed in touch and still get to connect in these really beautiful ways. Like I have someone who we used to be pretty intimately involved like with each other's families as well, and we don't talk as much anymore, but we're still like one another's go-to person for like, hey, I've got some family drama, I've got the tea, and I need someone to vent who's
Right.
seen it. And because we both have that experience, like there's just such a level of support, and it'd be so sad to not be open to that kind of connection for me, at least.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So tapping in again to the fullness of the abundance of love, right? Love isn't just all the way at the top of the escalator, right? It's infinite with all of these different connections. You could have a deep relationship with someone you talk to once a year. And sometimes we have deeper relationships with someone we talk to once a year than some of our coworkers, who you see every day, and you have the how's the weather conversation every day, right? And so, it's the fullness of that when you feel it in all these different connections. And so, I'm curious. I feel like we're kind of hitting on this next question, which is why do you practice relationship anarchy? Why is this important to you?
Yeah, I practice a relationship anarchy for so many reasons. And the more I explore it, the more I just realize, oh, it helps me really live out a lot of my core values in different ways. Like, as I mentioned, getting to show up and care for the people of my life and not just care for like one romantic partner, but thinking about that more expansively
Mhm.
is one thing that I really love about relationship anarchy, that openness and getting to learn more like about myself, about other people around me, and then really authenticity of getting to just learn more and more about who I am as a person, who my loves are as people, and learn more about the world. Like it leaves me open to, oh, maybe I can make the time to go explore this like one aspect of something I've been interested in. And who knows, maybe it'll become a really big part of my life, or maybe I'll go a few times. And not that you can't do that in another framework, but I think it's easier to be open to new connections like that. in the
Mm-hmm.
paradigm of relationship anarchy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the freedom of possibilities. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that it's beautiful when there's space for the unfolding of what each relationship can bring into your life. I'm recalling someone who who Ah, this person said they were a relationship and they knew about my dissertation. They're like, "Oh, I'm a
Mhm.
relationship anarchist because no one can control me and like fuck that." And I was like, "Oh, well, wow, we have very different concepts of relationship anarchy." But like, hi, hello. Um, and they had come up to me afterwards and they were like, "Hey, like Nicole, do you want to spend some time together?" And I had said like, "Sure, like as like friendly platonic, I'd love to do that, you know?" And they were like, "No, like not as friends." And I was like, "Oh, this is awkward. Hi." Like it feels very antithetical to relationship anarchy to come up to me and be like, "Hi, I want to date you," you know, and be like not just like, "Hi, I want to spend time with you." Does that make sense? Like
Oh,
this yeah, this intentionality that this person had essentially saying like, "Hi, I want to fuck you. You know, I would like to have sex with you." And I said, "Hey, can we like hang out as friends?" And they're like, "No, that's not what I want." And you're like,
it must be the certain way.
yeah, like I'm
Yeah,
like, hi,
some,
can we just get to know each other as friends first and see where this goes, buddy? I don't know. You know what I mean?
well, there's so many, like, there's that level of expectation and trying to let go of that, of, yeah, like just caring about, and I think you get to like see what really matters to you. Like, is it emotional intimacy? Maybe some people really thrive on a ton of physical intimacy, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like,
Oh, yeah.
go being a slut,
Yeah,
like, it'd
totally.
be
Hell yeah.
lovely. And at the same time, yeah, like it's all about the letting go, which it can be tricky to meet people who really have that same paradigm. I mean, there's so many people who use the term, or I feel like really commonly kind of people think about it and they think, oh, anarchy, that means I can do whatever I want, no commitments, like no rules. And that's not what it is either. Like I really ascribe to you can be whoever you want to be, but just don't hurt other people.
Hmm.
And I think that's a really key part. Like you're still accountable to the people. Like you can still cause harm. And
Yeah.
that's not the goal. Like freedom does not mean you get to cause as much harm as you want. I at least personally think that we should still really be striving to minimize this harm. Like we're going to harm the people in our lives, but a really key part of doing this well, like, and people talk about ethical non-monogamy, and that ethical piece is so important of you can talk about it, like try to set expectations if it's something that you know you want, like you were getting attached to someone or figuring out, hey, like this didn't quite sit right with me. And instead of just like holding that resentment, like actually making it a conversation with someone.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah, I think about the skills it takes to really have those conversations though as someone who
Mhm.
just who led a couples therapy session today where they were just yelling at each other and I was like, oh God, like how do I stop
Ugh.
this from happening, like what do I do as the therapist? I'm just sitting there watching this like, oh dear God, I don't you know there's just so many skills to have those conversations that I think the majority of people don't have under our current system, hence where I appreciate your discussion of relationship anarchy being absolutely political, right? So when our average reading grade level in the United States is sixth grade, we have to talk about how that impacts accessibility to even concepts of anarchy and thinking about it
Mhm.
as chaos when you read the text and the philosophy it's really about community and mutual aid, like it's almost the opposite of that, but we're in a system where the average reading level is sixth grade and so that prevents access to right, and so like hence how this is so deeply political to have even a conversation about desires and needs from another person when we don't have the skills.
Yeah, and there's so many, like the story of codependency, especially within the family, is so prevalent. Like I knew I very much grew up in an environment where it was, oh, my feelings are hurt.
Mm,
This is your responsibility. Like you
mm,
must do something about it.
mm,
And it, it's really difficult, especially when you're first unlearning these skills. And even when you're not unlearning them, it can still like it does have a way of really hitting at, oh, that touched a nerve. That was triggering. Like I need to actually like it practicing this will teach you about so many different triggers that you didn't know you had.
yeah, even as you said that, I felt that in my body. It was like, oof, yeah, still in learning. I just went to I just had like a event with some like five of my different lovers, right? And so like
Mhm.
as I'm sitting there, I'm with all of these people, I'm like, are you okay? Like, are you happy? 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 It's like, girl. You cannot be that responsible for everybody, you know? Like you cannot. No, like people are gonna do that. So I'm still unlearning that
Oh, it's
too.
so, yeah. And like, not that, like, that's a beautiful
Right?
information too. And
Gotta chill.
yeah, like, it's lovely that you want to check in. Like, the first time that I was like with a love and like with one of their other loves and like getting to
Uh-huh.
see them hold space for both of us and like
Yeah.
checking in, that was like, oh, this is a way to feel cared for that I didn't know I wanted. And like,
Mm,
it's so beautiful to get to see, like, I mean, at that point, I was really new to non-monogamy, and even just getting to see like a partner explore themselves with someone else and getting to see someone else really appreciate them and who they were was,
mm.
yeah, so lovely. But
It's beautiful to be a part of those moments, right?
mhm.
Because they're often very privatized in our puritanical society, you know, where you can't, you can't do anything in the erotic. So to or it just, basic care often in our society can be really taboo, a kiss, a handhold, all that sort of stuff. So to be able to see that, see a love be loved by another person, that's, compersion and to feel all of that, those are often very privatized moments. And so it can be such an expansion to bring some of those into shared spaces beyond just a dyadic form of one and another person, for sure. Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
Beyond relationship anarchy too. And I feel like all of these things just relate to each other. So this
They
conversation's kind of
absolutely
going
are.
all over
Yes.
the place in a beautiful way, but it's beyond like the practice too can just be normalizing talking about certain things with
Mm,
a wide variety of types of connections too. Yeah, like normalizing talking about sex, like talking about pleasure. I was having a
mhm,
conversation recently with someone of pro pleasure and pro intimacy could be the new like pro sex because it's not that it necessarily like pleasure and intimacy can mean so many different things, but just normalizing talking about what feels good to us or talking about yeah any of these things with
mhm,
even connections that we might not just not like oh and you need to talk about this to a complete stranger because you don't need to share your life story with someone
mhm,
um, or like everyone you meet, but yeah, just because you're with someone where maybe you're not intimate in a certain way doesn't mean that being able to normalize talking about that with them can still be a really grounding practice or a way to learn more about both of you.
mhm. Absolutely, absolutely. Which is spot on for the next question, which is how does relationship anarchy impact your practice of intimacy? So you're already speaking to the ways that it opens up more capacity for conversations that are often privatized into more expansive webs of love. I'm curious, what are some of the other ways that relationship anarchy has impacted your intimacy?
Trying to think of like what does intimacy mean? I think first and foremost, it's really enabled me to explore emotional intimacy with so
Mm,
many people. Like try just to practice. It's encouraged me to practice being vulnerable with as not as many people as I can, but when I do trust the people in my life, I want to show up and be honest with them. And it's also I'm a person who doesn't experience a big difference between like falling for a quote unquote friend versus a quote unquote romantic partner. Like just
mm,
wanting to get to know someone, flirting for lack of a better word, of just like,
sure.
yeah, like wanting to learn more and get to experience a person in different contexts is something that I kind of experience. I know there's not a clear line between platonic and romantic connections to me. Like there's a difference
Yeah.
between physical attraction and having that there or not. But for me, most usually it's more wanting to get to know the person. And I don't experience the strong distinction like type. And it's allowed me to just get to go after that curiosity for the people in my life
Mm-hmm.
and then get to kind of see what feels good for both of us
Yeah,
and honor that. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and each relationship's going to be incredibly unique, you know?
totally.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about how we talk about the relationship escalator. There's also a physical intimacy escalator. I've noticed for myself in my different connections where if I start kissing someone, and I'm doing work to deconstruct it and I feel pretty good, but you got to also do it with the person that you're with and make sure they're on the same page. Just because we've kissed does not mean I want to fuck you. And just because
Oh,
we, um, I don't know, like had sex once doesn't mean I want to have sex with you forever or ever again, maybe, right? it's interesting, at least for myself, how I think coming from the paradigms of monogamy, there's this felt sense of if I do this, it's on a escalator type as I build intimacy with that person. Of course, one night stands, moments, play parties, pick up play, but like if I am developing a long-term relationship and we open up the box of physical touch, once we've done A, it's supposed to lead to B, to C, to D, right? And to kind of like throw that all out the window and be like, maybe this is a person I actually like going to hang out with, spend quality time kissing and snuggling, and that is perfect for our relationship. It feels really good. Like, great.
I love getting to like kiss people or like really like long hugs as a way to show affection for the people in my life.
Mm, hmm.
And clearly, not to say you just do that without consent. Like consent is really
Of course.
important. Like wanting to, like, I don't know, I feel like it's important to
Yeah,
caveat
totally, totally.
that. And yeah, so like you can. It makes me want to go back to the word escalate and de-escalate, but you can just be open
Sure.
to what feels good in the moment. And maybe your libido is really high for a period of time, and then maybe it changes. Like I recently went on HRT, and that has been a wild ride of showing up, like, and
Sure.
how I feel in my body and like what I want. And just getting to be open to that and trying to communicate with that to the people who want to know more about that in my life is just, yeah, that's been a whole level of intimacy too.
Doesn't it feel liberating to not have that pressure to show up in a certain box of like meaning making, you know? Ugh.
And it does like, I don't know, I guess when I think of intimacy, I think of play as well as
Yeah.
a kind of vulnerability, like whether that's kink or even just like I am a sucker for games. I love role-playing games,
Yeah.
other kinds of games, and just I think intimacy, like it doesn't, as we've been talking about before, there's so many other kinds of intimacy than just physical intimacy, and getting to invite that joy and that spark into your connections, like whatever it can maybe,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
really fun.
Yeah, it's reminding me of the love is abundant, right? Not love is sex. Love is abundant. And so for you, playing those board games, the role-playing games, that is a space of deep intimacy and connection and eros and passion and life force, right? And so that is love. And so to see it fully in that is so beautiful. So I'm curious then. We are talking on some of the good things about relationship anarchy. This is where I balance it out a little bit. We'll do two different questions here, but the first one is, what are the difficulties of relationship anarchy?
No, there are none. It's so
Oh,
smooth.
right, exactly. It's
Yeah,
so easy. It's so easy. Why are we even talking about
it's
this?
it's
You know,
perfect. Just do it. It's
everybody
so
does it.
easy.
Everybody does it.
Everyone understands exactly
I
what
know.
your life looks like when you
You
say you're
struggle? You
just
struggle? I don't struggle.
you do. Okay, good, good. Neither do
I'm
I. No.
beyond that. I'm beyond that.
Uh,
Uh,
no, it's God, there are a lot of ways that it's challenging. I mean,
uh-huh.
life is challenging. Anything worth doing is challenging.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think there's both challenges that should be there, that are warranted, or like will be there regardless, and then challenges that won't be there. I mean, obviously, like as the manifesto says, heterosexism is rampant. It's out there, especially in today's political climate. There are a lot of people trying to erase all sorts of queer identities right now, and it's important to name that because we're not going anywhere. But seeing that is, yeah, it takes a huge mental toll. There's a toll of like in your relationship with yourself. There's a toll and just risks of where it's safe to be out or how other people will perceive you, or even, I mean, sometimes physical violence, like depending on what your identities are and how you show up in the world. So that those are very real risks. There's also just risks of people not understanding or like not knowing how to talk about your relationships. Like when I talk about wishing there was a better word or we had more language, part of that is just to be able to communicate to help other people really understand you. And
Yeah.
we make a lot of assumptions, and even I think these assumptions hurt us all, even if you are in a monogamous, type of relationship. But there's still just a lot of assumptions about, oh, like here's what your dynamic looks like, here's the maybe the gender role that you both play in that connection or anything like that. And it's like humans want to make patterns, so when you don't have that language, it can be that much harder to explain it. It shows up in all kinds of conversations. You're talking to your
Mhm.
coworkers about what are you doing this weekend, and you have to think about like how am I describing it, or like do I feel safe saying, oh, one of my partners or loves, as we were talking about, or lover, like what yeah, you have to think about language in such a different
Yeah.
level in terms of like what is safe, how you want to like what will make you feel seen, because it can take more work to actually feel seen by certain people too. Especially
Yeah.
like I don't know, I've spent a lot of time like I'm it's definitely a special interest of mine. I'm a nerd about relationships, which just helps me
Yeah.
teach so much about it. And I'm in a lot of beautiful connections with people who haven't spent as much time about it. And just because they haven't spent that time doesn't mean that I don't want them to get to see me for who I am.
Right.
And I'd
Hmm.
say all of those are things that could be remediated if our society looked different, or like as we work towards liberation for us all and more flexibility in what our relationships can look like and what our community structures can be. And then beyond that, there's a whole host of difficulties that, even if we lived in this perfect, liberated world, we're still going to have so many difficulties of it's fucking terrifying to really ask
Hmm.
yourself, what do I want every day, to let go of longevity of a relationship or a certain structure as a form of security in your connection, to really need to find that security in your web, but then also first and foremost in yourself, of like needing that self-trust to be what guides you. Yeah, making your own script, even if we had many other scripts and we're able to see a wide variety of scripts in our lives, it's still a scary thing to do.
Yeah. Exploring the unknown, like, is not for the faint of heart, to put it lightly, right? It is not. It is not. Um, yeah, as you were speaking, I was just thinking about all of the different times that I have quite frankly given up or maybe protected, whatever word we want to say, on other people understanding my life and what I do. I'm just like,
Mhm.
I've been at like different like jobs where I've just said my partner consistently, even though every time I say that, I'm referring to a different lover in my head of like, oh, I was talking to my partner and my
Yeah.
partner and I went over, but I'm like, you need to think that I just have one so that you don't persecute me and my job security. And so I'm gonna say my partner. And so there's been so many times I do that, or you say you start to take the time to invest your capitalism. You start to, what's a word? It's not spend time. It's not spend, invest.
It has to be a good garden metaphor to like plant.
Yeah, plant time.
I don't
Yeah, yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You're sharing your time. You're sharing your time with your friend, and you start to explain what you're doing and how you want
Cultivate,
to. What'd you say?
cultivate maybe.
Sure,
So
yeah. You're cultivating time with this person, and we are telling them, I want to love people. Like, platonic relationships are just as important as romantic relationships. Look at my web. This is what I've got going on. And then they look at you and they're like, well, that's wild. I could never do that. And you're like, okay, I wasn't asking for that. Just wanted you to see me. But thanks for that input, and then, or if you'll ask for support as you're going through it. Wow, I'm noticing all these people pleasing tendencies coming up. What do you think? Well, that's just crazy. I could never do that structure. That's why it never works out. Oh, okay, and so there is a lot of pain at the different points of feeling unseen, feeling misunderstood. A lot of my research for my dissertation talked about therapists failing to see their clients. My dissertation research participants naming how therapists failed them. Or really took it to the deeper extreme of pathologizing them of, wow, you have multiple lovers. Look at your disorganized attachment, avoidant attachment, blah, 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 blah. Oof, that's a scary one that I'll fight for the rest of my career. And I fight is the right word for that.
I mean, so many of this was in the DSM until very recently. It's
Right.
not still isn't. It is really tricky because it is a form of coming out. Like practicing a new relationship style requires coming out of the closet, and there are going to be certain connections that go along and it might be difficult to think of the right way to word this. And you were talking about judgment, and
Yeah.
it's a really fine line of I definitely have like loves in my life who relationship anarchy is not something to think about. A few of them
Right.
might be listening to this later on, which is exciting to think about.
Hi, friends.
Also,
Hi.
yeah, hi. Um, and for some of them, like honestly, a little bit nerve-wracking. Like I'm curious to hear what they'll think or how it resonates, because I know it's not the kind
Yeah.
of conversation that they're all having all the time.
Mm.
But there's a difference, as you were talking about, between oh, that's interesting. And like wanting to know more, like, okay, not something that someone's like super, not necessarily like comfortable about talking about, but like there's a difference between that and like the judgment too.
Yeah.
I thought you were
Hmm.
saying of like I've definitely gotten the, oh well, I could never, like needing to qualify like any conversation around it as like this bound, like putting a wall between someone
Yeah.
and like how I choose to practice my life. And yeah, it's especially when I was first and like I mean I still feel like I'm fairly new, but I'm getting more like I'm constantly getting more and more comfortable showing up as myself in different relationships. And it can be really tricky to navigate, okay, what is just discomfort because this is a new subject for someone versus like
Sure.
where am I getting that judgment? And then obviously like I feel very fortunate of very few people in my life are explicitly like I'm not, it sucks that I have to say I feel fortunate, but I did not grow up in a religious community where like my queerness was seen as sin or something that was a reason to be ostracized. And that bar is so low, but like I don't want like that happens. And obviously, if people are in a situation like that, that's a challenge that many people deal with. But when even when that's not happening, yeah, it can still be painful to try to struggle. It can still be, I don't know. I think I've said what I've been trying to say.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. There's still struggle because the whole paradigm in our white Western monogamous culture, to name it specifically, because this is not all cultural groups, to be very clear, that's part of the
Mhm.
whole thing right here, everyone. It's not all cultural groups, but within our culture, this is not the normal paradigm. And I mean that we're normal to mean like what it means of like normal, you get accepted, all that sort of stuff. And so anything outside of that, yeah, if you come from more of like where I came from, of like a hyper religious, anti-queer space, it's even more to crawl out of. But there's still so much to crawl out of, even if you didn't weren't raised in any of that. There's so much indoctrination. Every
Mhm.
Hallmark movie you've ever seen, my friend, the rom-coms, it's deep within our psyche. And so that is around all of us. And then again, the systems that keep us as cogs in a machine to make money for the people at the top that take away our time and energy to explore concepts like this. Hence why the podcast is free and available on a platform, and you don't have to be able to read. You can listen. Wow. Okay. All of that, right, is at the core of what you're saying. So it's deeply related to capitalism and liberating ourselves from these structures that keep us so isolated. So I see you as much as I can in this moment here, right? And I think that's why when we started this, conversation before the recording, I had said how transformative it has been for me to have these conversations on the podcast because I feel so seen, I feel so understood, by a stranger that I have never met before, but we can sit together and know these two words and have a general sense of a vision of what we see for our lives and hope for society. And so that being some of the most like powerful moments of intimacy for sure.
Yeah, no, thank you for making space for these conversations.
Oh,
And yeah, with what you said, a couple of things on that of one, looking into just the, like learning more about the history of marriage or learning about relationships in different ways has been just helping me kind of like there's a humor to it. Like it's kind of ridiculous
uh-huh.
how recent the concept of marriage as it currently is, it like exists. And I mean, until extremely recently, it was very explicitly around concentration of wealth, passing down resources, who your heir is, or like who's going to get like your estate or whatever. And then even more recently, it needs to be this, I mean, the all or nothing marriage, this idea that it needs to be completely emotionally fulfilling, and that's the person that you come into your own with or your other half. And then with what you were talking about, you also mentioned a very real challenge of relationship anarchy of we are like in capitalism, we are robbed of so much time. Like everyone just we have so little time for our loves, for our hobbies, for ourselves. And it takes a lot of time to truly build this kind of intimacy with people. And
Mhm.
yeah, I found for me like the amount of energy that I have to, I mean, like especially invest in new relationships, like part of this practice for me has been accepting the ebb and flow. Like I feel really fortunate. I had a slower time at work when I first moved.
Yeah.
And I feel very aware of that's enabled me to build community here much faster than I otherwise would have been,
Mm-hmm.
which is a very like
Absolutely.
humbling thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. The in my dissertation, that was something that came out too was more college education, more people with college education and backgrounds showing up in my sample size. And so that being a part of the privilege that it takes to reflect on these things and have the time and the energy to build relationships in this way. And I think a great book for listeners who are curious about some of the stuff on marriage. Of course, there's Sex at Dawn. A lot of people know that one, but also How Love Conquered Marriage. If you really want to get deep into it, like, yeah, you can, all the different cultures in that one. And yeah, I think what's fascinating about that is like I devoted my academic studies to this topic and nerding out so hard on this. And theory and practice are two different things. In my mind, I can absolutely know that this is a cultural system. This is not how it's always been. Historically, this is actually, like you said, a very small blip of time. And I can know all of that as facts. And the second my partner held hands with another human of romantic interest, I lost my shit. And so it's been fascinating. It's much better now. Whew, what a journey.
And
But it's real.
I,
Go ahead.
oh, I would say that even just being able to acknowledge it, if instead of
Yeah.
saying like, "Oh, I lost my shit," and I'm not going to reflect on that at all, like that is so much of that process too. Of it's not being afraid of jealousy, it's not being afraid of these uncomfortable feelings,
Mhm.
even though you can initially be.
What an opportunity, dear listener, to reflect on where your psyche is at. When I am jealous, what narratives am I saying about them, about me, about what my worth is, about what is happening in the future? It's a deep psychedelic, one with a lot of pain. But if you sit for a second and think, wow, what is that immediate reaction that I'm having? There's so much that you can explore, just like deep mines of the psychological cavern that you can unpack with every time. And so I'm definitely not done with my jealousy journey. It is still very, yeah, exactly. You're shaking your head.
Yeah.
There's still so much to go. I do want to name that it has gotten better though. The things that I at least were like terrified about with polyamory at the beginning do not terrify me in the same way now. And so I'm optimistic about that continual development. But yeah, the praxis versus theory experiment is one of continual compassion for myself, for you, I'm sure, and for all of you, dear listeners, is to just take that deep breath as you can intellectually know something, but because of the systems, not you, because of the systems and how deeply that's been indoctrinated, it's gonna be uncomfortable. It's gonna be scary. And that's okay. That's okay.
And there's such a difference between knowing something and like getting to either like think it or deal with it in your body. I mean, I feel
Oh,
very fortunate that I have a therapist who specializes in queerness and various kinds of relationship structures. And
magical.
that's another privilege. Yeah, it's amazing to have someone I can reflect with on that. I've also, it's funny, like one of my first experiences with jealousy was actually the reverse.
Oh.
Yeah, so when I first met my current partner, I was also I had a few other lovers at the time and would remember like coming back from another date and he would be pretty fine. Like he really wouldn't have like he would just be ready to like connect, but didn't experience much jealousy at the time. And that dysregulated me. Like
Ooh.
it took me a while to really trust that he was not experiencing something that I had to caretake for.
Yeah.
Part of it comes from like I think I can have a bit of I call myself a recovering perfectionist and I can definitely try to control everything. It's like
Yeah,
by
same.
reading about it, I'm like, well, I read the thing and here's what you're supposed to do with jealousy. So like let me show up and be the good relationship anarchist and do the thing. But yeah, it's just
Sure.
another form of really being open and honest about where you're actually at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I hear you in terms of that caretaking. Are you sure you're not jealous? Wait, are you are you lying? Which it's an important line of thought though, because some folks will like really try to hold that back, really try to hold that back. And then I think about the other thing in our society of this deep social conditioning that jealousy is a sign of your love, right? And so if I came home to a partner who's not jealous, it's like, well, do you even love me? Do you even care about me? Which is something to unpack too, that the possessiveness is not necessarily a sign of love per se. I'm just gonna say that confidently.
Yeah, and over time, like getting to hear him reflect back to me, like the joy that he's seen in me, or the ways that he can tell that I am exploring more about myself. I think it really took having more of those conversations to feel more grounded in how he responded. And it's also been interesting of since then we have navigated times of jealousy.
Beautiful.
And it's always funny to see like, oh, that comes up for you in very different ways than I think it would come up for me.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So we'll balance it out then, and
Mhm.
I'll ask you the next question, which is, what are some of the joys of relationship anarchy?
So many. It's hard not to like take a moment and just smile from being asked that
Yeah.
question.
Hell yeah.
Um,
You
I
deserve
can,
that. After everything we just said, you deserve that.
mhm. Me
Yeah.
too.
Whew.
Like everyone who's on this journey, if I think it can just open you up to so much support, so much care, so much love, and not necessarily like turning away connections because they don't need to be a certain kind of thing. Even being comfortable like de-escalating, like I think I've had, quite frankly, like I've had some family connections that I've had moments of, is this someone I can keep in my life? And I think having more of these tools has helped me set better boundaries and understanding, okay, here is how I can connect with this person, and here's maybe where I can't connect instead of me needing to completely go black and white, which feels funny as a joy, but like, no, it has meant that I can hold some relationships that are really important to me, but have had a lot of pain and still find ways to uphold them in my life. It's allowed me to look back and get to build all kinds of different unexpected connections that hold me, that I get to hold these people. I get to explore so many different parts of myself. Even moments like what you're just talking about, like getting to find moments that make me feel really seen, that make me feel really loved outside of the typical scripts. Yeah, of like just getting to continuously learn more about who I am and what I really want, or like being open to figuring out, like, especially I think as I get older, I'm in my late 20s right now, and I'm starting to really feel that like for queer communities, unfortunately, that is pretty much an elder, almost an elder, and you don't see a ton of examples of what later, like middle and late stages in life look like for queerness, or at least not as many expansive models as you get of, at least for me, of I had a lot more examples of the very particular form of marriage.
Right.
And then really getting to figure it out or getting to build community and seeing people doing life all different ways. Or getting to say like, oh, this is super affirming. Yeah, like coming home from a date and getting to like have that energy of like, oh, I'm learning about a new skill, or like I've recently been playing more and exploring like shibari and rope, and like getting to
Hmm.
learn that, even though like not, I don't need one person to fulfill all those needs. And like it's getting to be open with, I don't have to close off certain parts of myself
Yeah.
just because like the person I live with doesn't necessarily share those parts.
Right. How expansive.
Mhm.
Really, right? When you sit with that, how expansive to be able to not have to shut yourself off. I think, so much again of our society will say you have to do relationships in this way, which makes me think about all of the, in this way, as in one person that fulfills all of your
Mhm.
things, not what we just talked about. One person, one person, one person was one person that you should live with because that's what you do when you're normal, right?
Of
And so
course.
if, duh. And so if you
Perfectly
don't
normal.
do that, right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so if you don't do that with them, you're a bad person. You are XYZ, whatever labels, we want to throw on that, cheating, all the other complexities that we can throw onto that. And so I think about the life force energy of passion and eros that is completely shut off, to think if you had really wanted to do shibari and your nesting partner didn't, to think, wow, okay, I can't do this because it will hurt this dynamic, and how you have to shut off that part of yourself, let alone the erotic parts of ourselves that, again, I've talked about this on the podcast, like, yeah, everyone gets to do whatever they want, but our bodies respond to multiple people. If I put a monogamous person in a sex research experiment where they are watching porn, their body will react to multiple people. And that's just a lived experience, that we all react to more than one person and have arousal complexes for that, right? And so there's so much, at least in the sexual like freedom space for me, of my body longs to have that kiss. Doesn't even have to be sex. I long to kiss this person, and I feel that in my body. But if I was in the old paradigm, it'd be like, you're a bad girl, how dare you, you are not faithful to your person, wrong, wrong, wrong. And so I have to shut off my life force. I have to disconnect from my bodily desires to fit into this paradigm. And so, man, I am so curious, as people, like polyamory is one of the most Googled term I heard of the last last year. And so like we
Mhm.
are, yeah, it is happening. Cultural conscious, we're always going to have diversity. We're always going to have monogamy, polyamory. We're always going to have something going on here, right? But as the cultural consciousness is rising into more, rising, as the cultural consciousness is expanding into more, ex uh, ways of relating beyond monogamy, I am curious what our passion and life force is going to feel like when we're not cutting it off to fit into this box of a narrative anymore.
Yeah. And I think that obviously, I have seen some people where they first learn about non-monogamy and relationship anarchy and they get kind of militant about it. Of like, oh, you must be like, everyone must be a
Yes,
certain
yes,
way.
yes, yes.
No, like the point of it is expansiveness and being open however you show up. Like being
Right.
monogamous can be a perfectly beautiful way of relating. But it regardless, I think kind of learning how to take what works for you and what doesn't, and getting to maybe being comfortable exploring and playing, like not that you have to try on different relationship styles, but just giving yourself a sense of like what actually resonates and making it a choice instead of a, oh, it must be a certain way, can bring you so much energy in different ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so,
And it also like I always wonder, I mean, you were talking about this expansiveness and I think some language like I feel so grateful for like all the texts that we have about relationship anarchy and all the different like values and example like that's something that we don't I'd love to see even more of because we don't have that. It's kind of hard. You have to dig for it, but having those like having the manifesto like and things to point to and learn from is so powerful. And I'm curious to see how labels evolve as
mhm.
people become more and more aware of different kinds of connections and relating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so gratitude for you for being a part of that process of creating public content and resources on the conversation, right? Every single conversation we have, all of the listeners who are tuning in, it impacts their consciousness, right? It impacts my consciousness. I'll hold our conversation when I go into the next. And so, we are working together as a collective to create more language and to evolve with these two words, relationship anarchy. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious then, the last question. What do you wish other people knew about relationship anarchy?
I think the first thing that came to mind is relationship anarchy isn't all about sex. I think some people
Yeah,
assume, oh, like you're having a whole bunch of sex or like you must be really slutty. And again, like
I
being slutty
am.
is amazing. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
owning that. And that's not the point. Like,
Yep.
if anything, relationship anarchy has helped me be really kind to myself during periods when I've had more depression, when I've felt less slutty, because of depression or because of other things. And at least for me, it's about emotional intimacy first and foremost over sex. It's about getting to know people and being vulnerable. And sometimes it requires a lot of work too. Like
Hmm.
I was talking about how like I do check-ins. I love the radar
Yeah,
tool from Multiamory and
sure.
telling a friend about it. And she asked me, oh, so you project manage your relationship?
You
And
don't? Sorry, hold on.
like, yeah, kind of honestly, it
Sorry,
really
what
helps.
what do you do? You just trust that the other person knows exactly what you mean without saying it? Oof,
Um,
complex.
yeah, I'm trying to But yeah, like even I think you can still practice relationship anarchy in a monogamous context too. Like there's nothing saying that you can't have one like sexual relationship or one. Again, it's hard for me to use the word romantic just because personally I don't always know what that means. But if you want one romantic relationship or one relationship that has this exclusivity, that can still be relationship anarchy, or you can still create frameworks where you're open to love in all ways, where you're really being intentional about how you connect or communicating. Like even one of the forms of the manifesto that I find personally really difficult is like starting with like leading with trust and
Mm,
assuming best intentions.
yes.
It's I find that that impacts so many small details of how I'm relating to people, of just like moments when I feel hurt and how I think about harm
Yeah.
relationship. And yeah, it's dealing with conflict is tied to this. It's about
Mhm.
so much more than just sex.
Yes, such a good point to share because whew, part of the main concepts of relationship anarchy is that our sexual and romantic, however we define that lovely gray word, are not more important than our platonic connections, right? So
Mhm.
inherently, that means it's not about sex. And so some people get very, like you were saying, vitriolic to say you cannot practice monogamy and relationship anarchy. That is antithetical. And I say, okay, are you prioritizing the sexual connections as if that's somehow the definer of, the whole th Didn't we start with the first premise of it's not about that? And I think if you are a monogamous person practicing relationship anarchy, I think the clarity from relationship anarchy of what do we want to design this like is really important. What does monogamy mean to us? In other cultures, kissing on the lips, on the cheek is super normal. In America, it is not. So is that considered cheating? Is that considered okay? You and your lover, whoever that is, sit down and co-create and design that for yourself, right? So those values of co-creating rather than assuming that we're just going to go into this blanketly, I think is really, really important. And something that I've thrown around on the podcast as an alternative way of speaking about it is sexual fidelity, right? And
Mhm.
if the word monogamy for some folks has so much tied up to it, is it is a heavy word and they don't like it anymore. Maybe we use the word sexual fidelity because you can do that in a dyad, you can do that in a polycule, right? Having a enclosed sexual practice, right? And then see beyond that as, you're still able to form all these deep connections. And then you're not using that word monogamy that often has so much like critical weight to it in the community. That's something I've thrown around for folks who have kind
Mhm.
of resonated with that, like, oh, I practice sexual fidelity. And kind of gets maybe out of some of the stickiness of this. Often tied to monogamy is this concepts of the romance myth, which is antithetical to relationship anarchy, right? In that sense of like riding the escalator and never thinking about it and all of that. So if the act of having sex with one person is not antithetical to relationship anarchy, maybe we use a new word. Maybe we create more language and like, hey, I'm a relationship anarchist that practices sexual fidelity with this one person, you know, just throwing out more language, you know? Yeah.
No, I like that because language, it does like people also sometimes think that it means that like if you don't have a certain kind of relationship, you don't have commitments in your life, or they think that
Mm,
commitment, like, there's a very common narrative around I'm looking for a committed relationship and what that's supposed to mean. And it goes right back to that relationship escalator. And there's so many other ways to have commitments. Like,
yeah.
again, like making commitments to friends about continuing to show up for each other or wanting to make like lifelong commitments. Like I definitely have a few friends where we talk about the dream of co-housing and
Right.
building a home together. And I would love to see that happen. I know personally, I don't want to be a parent in a couple in my life, but I really want to be an auntie. I want to get to
Mm-hmm.
experience like being part of that village and caring for
Mm-hmm.
children as they grow up, or getting to, help my friends have date nights. And it's been cool to like, I have another friend who recently had a child, and like it's been cool
Yeah.
to start to get to be a part of his life. And that's been just such
Yeah.
a beautiful moment. And yeah, there's so many kinds of it's difficult to hold that authenticity to yourself and be open to change with commitments, but the having that first value doesn't mean that you have no commitments.
Right. 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 Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's more about getting to give yourself space to ask yourself, like, what do I want before making that commitment? And then like putting in the work of like, let's talk about this commitment. Let's kind of see what we want it to be.
Yeah.
Let's talk about if we want it to be open to change or not. I mean, there's certain commitments like having a kid or buying a house where I really hope people are taking that seriously because it's
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. 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 Hey, I have a commitment to continually show up for the conversation of, is this working for us? I'm committed to that. Is this working for us? Is this still working for us? Do we like where we're going? I'm committed to that. I have no idea. And anyone who thinks they know, I think is wild. Like, we have no idea what life is going to do to us. We have no idea. And I know that's scary. I know it's scary that we're all going to die one day. But these are the inevitables of the human experience, is that change is inevitable. We are all going to die. Scary, but it is here. What you can commit to is, I'm going to keep showing up to have this conversation with you. Do you like what we're doing right now? And if not, how do we change it? How do we deepen it if we do like it? And so, one of the things I've been saying to my lover, one of my lovers is like through proximity and distance, right?
Mhm.
I promise to love you through chapters of proximity and distance, whether that's the proximity that we have as we're intimate together right now, and the distance when you're with other lovers, and the proximity of talking to you every day now, or the distance of talking to you once every year, once every 5 years. Who knows? I don't know. What I do know is that it will always be communicated and that it will always be mutual, right? There will never be coercion or forced of the connection because there is abundance and we don't need to do that to each other. We do not need to do that to each other. And so I can trust that whatever is going to happen is going to be pleasurable in a full context, not necessarily in the moment, because pain is very real. But when I look over at my life, overall, it is pleasurable because it's in these value systems of commitment and the inevitability of change. Yeah.
Like I have a few people in my life where I'm very committed to, I will keep showing up for you and figuring out like what that means. And
Yeah.
really what that look like, that can mean various different things. And it has meant various kinds of support over the years from like really helping like ensure people are like helping feed people or being an accountability buddy for a goal or something like that. But the thing that is shared there is that meta communication of making it really clear, like, yeah, this relationship, this connection matters to me. Like I will keep,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
have to water your relationships.
Yes.
Sometimes people say that they should be easy and like there's a level of, okay, if something is too effortful, maybe it's a good time to check in with yourself. But relationships, they take effort and it is a form of work. And being clear with the people, like I try to be really clear with the people in my life. People listening, like tell me if I don't always do this too. I know I could do better, but like when that, just being open with gratitude or like expressing how much a connection means to me or like wanting to continue showing up. And then depending on the connection, making point like opportunities for reflection on that of how is this working? How do we feel about how often we're talking about or talking together or like the activities we're sharing?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Such a beautiful practice. Yeah. Well, I want to check in with you and see if there's anything else that you want to share with the listeners. Otherwise, I can guide us towards our closing question.
And we've talked about care, we've talked about it being a political practice, talked about play.
Hmm.
Mhm. I think science, I've talked a little bit about some of my inspirations and like texts that have helped me better articulate my own values,
Hmm.
but science fiction, and this ties
Mm,
into like play and kind of why I like
sure.
various like just role playing and getting to explore the worlds. But science fiction has been a huge learner for me of getting to understand and see just different structures. Like Ursula Le
I
Guin,
was gonna say
Octavia
that. Yeah.
Butler, Becky Chambers is a recent one. Like, I don't know, there's so many ways that we can inspired for different kinds of community care, different kinds of relating.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Another world is possible, and some writers have
Yes.
fully fleshed out that world and given us something to even tap into in
Mhm.
that way with fiction.
Adrienne Marie Brown's Grievers trilogy is another really good one that's recently coming out.
Hmm. Amazing, amazing. Well, if it feels good to you, I'll guide us towards our closing question.
Mhm.
Great. Okay, so first I'm going to take a deep breath with you. And so the last question that I have is, what is one thing that you wish other people knew was more normal?
Another question that I've heard you ask many times now. There's the compulsory like anarchy test of what is
You're
normal?
a listener. Hell yeah. I
Yeah.
love that you know that. Yes. Amazing.
Like I think if you're asking yourself what is normal, there's already a moment of what does that mean to you? Like what are you
Right.
there's probably
I
some
like
sort of pressure that you're
That's
feeling
right,
and trying to do that.
anarchist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where did that come from? I think not being okay might
Mm,
be
yeah,
one too. I
especially right
guess,
now. Wow.
yeah,
Yeah. That makes sense under these systems. Yep. Oh, oh,
yeah.
yep. Yep.
Like we spent a lot of time being open to like, what do you want? What do you think what works? But also just having less energy. Like as we've talked about these kind of practices and having expansive relationships takes a lot of work. And I feel lucky that I've like invested enough in, there we go, that word
I
invested.
know. I know.
Watered, I've
Yes.
watered my relationships like enough that right now I definitely am going through a period of more depression, and I feel really lucky to have people who are reaching out and making a point to do that watering as well for me,
Mhm.
are okay if I don't have quite the same energy levels that I normally do.
Yeah.
Just being able to ask for help, like it's and finding that really difficult. Like it can take a lot of time to really understand what asking for help might look like.
Hmm.
And I think it's really easy for us to be hard on ourselves for that.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's so much vulnerability in saying, hey, I am scared. I need some support right now, or would you be willing to give me the support right now? That's a lot of vulnerability that's not normalized in our culture, right? So I think you're tapping into something really powerful, especially in our current time, the need for community and the need to be vulnerable about the support that we all need right now.
And I'm scared and I don't know what I need right now, or I
Yeah.
know that
Yeah.
checking in with me is a very small thing that helps me feel 2% better.
Mhm.
And so I can at least ask for that, or I can say, hey, can you, I mean, I've been telling friends like, hey, I'm not in a great place and I don't know exactly what I need, but if you could keep checking in with me over time and seeing what I need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I'm so glad you have that community.
Community is powerful
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
it's real.
Absolutely. It's medicine. It's everything. It's life. Truly, truly, truly. So I'm so grateful to have had you today on the show as a part of the community of relationship anarchists who have trusted me and who have shared their voice and been a part of the conversation on relationship anarchy. And so just immense gratitude for you for coming on to the show today.
Thank you, Nicole, again for making this space. And it's been inspiring. I have loved getting to hear all of the conversations you've shared and feel
Yeah.
lucky, excited to get to be a part of this conversation too.
Yeah. So beautiful. So beautiful. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, then leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. And head on over to modernanarchypodcast.com to get resources and learn more about all the things we talked about on today's episode. I want to thank you for tuning in, and I will see you all next week.